Drew here, and as someone who is not the biggest Stephen King fan, I have to admit right off the bat that I was really prepared to dislike this series, and the critical reviews that were coming out were not helping. But maybe it was just, low expectations, but I'm actually gonna say I would highly recommend this series so far. Now you have to know, biggest problem I think for most people is going to be the pacing. I think that if you've read Stephen King, if you're a fan of his works, you know that he takes a long time to get to the point sometimes, and that his stories can kind of meander all over the place. But I would honestly say that this series feels a lot more intentionally paced to me than the novel that it's based upon. I'm about halfway through the novel, and I feel that perhaps the novel in some ways prepared me for how slow the series is, but I would say it's an intentional slow. It's moving at exactly the pace that it wants to. I wouldn't say that it was incompetence making it slow. So you have to be prepared for a slow burn, but I feel like it would be almost impossible to overstate how gorgeous this series is just to look at. The cinematography is fantastic. Darius Khondji has just really outdone himself. I can't honestly think of a more gorgeous looking show in recent memory. I think it's just fantastic to look at. And this makes me enjoy it even when it is moving at a slower pace, because I'm just enjoying how beautiful the cinematography is. The directing by Pablo Larraín, who is very good with female actors, I would say. He did a really fantastic job with Natalie Portman, and Jackie got her an Oscar nomination. And here, Julianne Moore just holds the screen so well. And this character that she's playing, Lisey, this woman who is quietly stewing in grief over the loss of a husband. And it's been 2 years, so I feel like it's a little bit hard to fathom how she hasn't moved on with her life at all. But a lot of people, I feel like, do deal with grief this way. It's a fantastic performance. She's pitch perfect casting, and there's just so many good actors in this show. I was expecting Clive Owen to be fatally miscast. It's an important role. Even though it's called Lisey's story, it's really, in some ways, Scott's story. Scott being the Stephen King stand-in character. Stephen King does this in pretty much every story. He has some character that you just know is the Stephen King character. And I really felt like Clive Owen would be bad casting because he's British, and I know that a lot of British actors can do amazing accent work. His accent here is a little spotty, to be honest, but the problem for me was I just didn't feel like he would be able to convey both the darkness. I felt like he could convey that aspect, but I didn't feel that he would be able to convey the goodness of Scott, his all-American Boy Scout side, that he's just this good-natured, amiable person. But he actually pulls it off very well. If you haven't read the book, I should probably explain the story a little bit. Lisey is the wife of a deceased author who won a Pulitzer and a bunch of other awards and is just very popular. Clearly a stand-in for Stephen King. And as she is, trying to decide what to do with these unpublished manuscripts, she finds herself targeted by a fan who believes that she has no right to these manuscripts and is demanding that she turn them over to him. This is played by Dane DeHaan, and he starts carrying out intimidating actions against her. And at the same time, she starts to see mysterious messages from her husband that lead her on a hunt for what she doesn't know. There's some mistakes here, I feel, in the adaptation, but it's Stephen King writing this thing, so if there's decisions that I don't understand, I guess that he had a reason for them, so you can't accuse it of not being faithful to the book at all. It's very faithful. Some people are saying too faithful. I really don't think so. I feel like he's actually made a lot of adaptational changes that surprised me and I didn't necessarily feel were necessary. But I do feel like he did put effort into making it cinematic as opposed to something that was just like the book. And I think that was very, very wise. I was ready to bash this series for being poorly adapted and being a series that should have stayed in book form. That was the perfection of its form. But I really don't think that's true. I really think he pulled it off. I really think he, so far in the first 2 episodes, has managed to adapt it very, very well. I think that one decision that I question, I think that the fact that there is this supernatural aura around Scott makes the character intriguing, but in the book it takes a very, very long time for the reader to find out what exactly it's all about. And the show is kind of playing it similarly, but there's a scene in the first episode between Clive Owen Scott and his sister-in-law, played by Joan Allen. Very, very interesting character. More on her in a second. But this scene, to me, they didn't need to have this scene because it laid their cards on the table as to the nature of his supernatural side a little bit too early, in my opinion. But I really, really find a lot of this story relatable. As I did in the book, I find the relationship between Scott and Lisey to have a lot of resonance for myself and my own marriage. And I feel that a lot of people will have that same identification with this relationship. I feel that some people will probably be critical of this series because Lisey is so obsessed with Scott and that she hasn't moved on, and that, you know, it's basically making her entire life come down to her marriage to one man. But I don't think that this is a sexist thing at all. I think you could just as easily, like if my wife were to die, I don't know how I would cope, and it would take me a very, very long time to move on. So I think that, you know, showing that someone's relationships are important to them doesn't diminish that person at all, and it doesn't, you know, relegate them to a supporting role in their own life, in my opinion. I do feel that this is obviously a very personal story for Stephen King. It's, I think the character of Lisey is probably based a lot on his wife, Tabitha King. I read his book On Writing where he talked about her a lot. And it's interesting how you explore this idea of how wives of famous men, or, you know, spouses of famous people in general, just live in the shadow of their spouse. And, you know, how people don't even consider them as an individual. They just consider them, as in this case, as Scott Landon's wife, and how you lose a little bit of your own sense of identity in that, but that you very much still exist as an individual. I think that it'll be interesting to see where this story goes. I feel that obviously there are a lot of different elements. I think that that could be something that's leading people to criticize this, because you have the supernatural elements, you have the stalker elements with Dane DeHaan's character, who I feel this show has a lot of fantastic actors. I could talk about all of them, but, you know, you can look up the cast list, but a lot of fantastic actors. But Dane DeHaan, to me, he comes off poorly. I feel like I'm getting shades of the Ezra Miller casting in The Stand. And it's not that I don't think he's trying. I do think he's trying, but I think the character is just way, way too off-putting, and it's hard to imagine how this person could exist. Like, you feel like the minute that anyone encountered this person, they would be dialing the police. And the fact that he is able to walk around and threaten people and have the impact that he does, to me, just seems a little bit far-fetched. I feel that the performance is just, he needed to throttle it back a bit. Instead, he just kind of goes full tilt at it, and I think it just makes him a little bit hard to find credible. But otherwise, the casting, I feel, is spot on and very, very enjoyable. As I said, Joan Allen, very, very good here as Lisey's sister, who is someone who self-mutilates and had a special relationship with Scott. And I find her character very, very fascinating in this. I think that she's playing the part very, very well and in an intriguing way. I feel like I haven't really seen a character played quite like this before. I was expecting this to be an adaptation that would only really work for Stephen King fans, but I actually am thinking that it will work for a lot of people who may not even consider themselves Stephen King fans. If you're a Stephen King fan, you should definitely check this out. I think you're going to love it. But if you're not a Stephen King fan, I might give it a chance just because I think it is pretty good. I don't know if there's like this Apple TV Plus bias going on. I hate to speculate why other people give things negative reviews, but to me, so far, very, very excellent. So those are my thoughts on the first 2 episodes of Lisey's story for what they are worth. If you're interested in seeing my upcoming reviews of Lisey's story and other shows, please consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching.